Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Hmm. I was born in a small three-room house in Galesburg, Illinois in 1878. We lived by the railroad tracks where my father worked. I had two other siblings, a boy and a girl, for three siblings in all. I liked to call myself Charles because it sounded more American. I had dropped out of school in the ninth grade to start working menial labor jobs to help support my family. My parents were immigrants from Sweden and spoke many Swedish around the home. So I had learned about 200 or 300 Swedish words before I had learned them in English. My father worked as a blacksmith helper, for he was not an official blacksmith, although he worked yearly. My mother stayed at home and took care of the children. I had no desire to work the 11-hour, 6-day-a-week menial labor job that my father had. I had no interest to work any menial labor job. Some of my first jobs. Well, because I had dropped out of school in the ninth grade to help support my family, some of my first jobs as a child were cutting ice at the local grocer, polishing shoes at the local barber shop, delivering newspapers and milk. And when I was in 11th grade, I worked as a stagehand at the local theater for politicians and public speakers. When I turned 19, I left Galesburg and became a door-to-door salesman with one of my very close friends. I also became a soldier during the Spanish-American War at age 20. After the war, I decided to go to college for 3 years, but mostly taught myself how to read and how to write like all the great poets before me. And I found my first writing job for the Social Democratic Party in the Socialist Review. Well, America was growing. The American Industrial Revolution was taking place. I was born only 13 years after the Civil War, so America was still rebuilding from the losses of the Civil War. The Spanish-American War happened. World War I, the Great Depression, World War II. There was a lot of violence and a lot of death and destruction during my time. I didn't intentionally want to become a poet. My dream was to become a writer for a newspaper. And it was my wife, Lillian Paula Steichen, that convinced me to keep writing my poems. I also wrote for the rights of people, all people, because I believe that they needed a voice and that they needed to be heard. I looked around the city of Chicago, and I noticed all the injustices and all the unfairness, and I felt that the world needed to know about this, and that this was happening not just in Chicago, but all around the world. Events that helped me become a better poet. Well, devastating loss of my second child at birth. My first collection of poems, called Chicago Poems, was published in 1915, and that gave me courage to keep writing my poems, and it gave me confidence. The thoughts and voices and words of the people during the hardships of World War I and after, I felt they needed to be heard, so I wrote for the people. I had also learned that my eldest child had epilepsy, and I started writing children's books called Rutabaga, about this country called Rutabaga Country, with its own government and all. And that got me into children's books, and that helped me evolve to become a better writer as well as a poet. Some of my most memorable moments would have to be marrying my beautiful wife, Paula, the publishing of Chicago Poems, and the winning of a Pulitzer Prize for my 6-part biography about Abraham Lincoln. I do not necessarily want to be remembered as one of America's greatest poets or writers, but I think people would remember me as... Sorry, there's a fly around and it's starting to bug me. I want to be remembered, or people would remember me as, a true socialist, a guitar player. People will mostly remember me before as being a poet of the people. I wrote for the common folk. I wrote for the poor folk. I wrote to encourage them. And I wrote for their thoughts and voices to be heard. I have wrote God knows how many poems and pieces of writing in my life, but my favorite and longest work would have to be my Abraham Lincoln biography that I won a Pulitzer Prize for. It took me 20 years to complete all 6 books. I didn't intend for it to be so long, but once I started writing, and after I finished the first 2 books of the 6-part novel called Prairie Years, I couldn't stop writing, and I had to continue. It's funny that you asked that. I recently just finished a poem called I Am the People, the Mob. Let me read it for you right now. I am the people, the mob, the crowd, the mass. Do you know that all the great work of the world is done through me? I am the working man, the inventor, the maker of the world's food and clothes. I am the audience that witnesses history. The Napoleons come from me, and the Lincolns. They die. And then I send forth more Napoleons and Lincolns. I am the seed ground. I am a prairie that will stand for much plowing. Terrible storms pass over me. I forget. The best of me is sucked out and wasted. I forget. Everything but death comes to me and makes me work and give up what I have. And I forget. Sometimes I growl, shake myself, and spatter a few red drops for history to remember. Then I forget. When I, the people, learn to remember, when I, the people, use the lessons of yesterday and no longer forget who robbed me last year, who played for me a fool, then there will be no speaker in all the world say the name the people with any fleck of a sneer in his voice or any far-off smile of desertion. The mob, the crowd, the mass will arrive then. thank you for having me. I hope you have a good day too.